President Trump is Time Man of the Year or Person of the Year again. But in contrast to last time around, which was in 2016 when he won that election, Time didn't play games like they did back then. Back then, they had him on the cover, and it was this sort of dark picture, and it said President of the Divided States of America or something to that effect. This time, it just says Donald Trump, and that's it. It's almost like they've given up. It's incredible. Not only did they give him the Man of the Year, but they didn't even play games.
It's kind of funny because it feels like we're witnessing a capitulation across a variety of fronts, and that would include the media. We see wokeism and DEI sort of dying before our eyes. Finally, you know, you just had Christopher Wray announce that he's stepping down. Now, that may have a lot more to do with the fact that he doesn't feel like being investigated and by the DOJ Inspector General or what have you. Not that I trust him either, but it does seem to be sort of a capitulation. That said, it also leaves me with a little bit of uneasiness of, I think it's always going to be there, that sense of what's next. And almost like things are too good to be true. Things are going so well right now in terms of, Trump moving forward. There's a lot of things that aren't going well. I mean, we're on the verge of World War III. That's great. But we seem to be making all these positive steps in the sense that January 21st cannot come soon enough. But, I don't know about you. I'm curious on your thoughts. I know for myself, I still have this sort of, I don't know if it's quite a sense of unease, but at a bare minimum, kind of a background reminder that, hey, there still may be another shoe that's to drop here.
Hey, I'm worse than you. Remember before the election, I was like, well, every single data point we had was absolutely clear Trump is going to win this. In terms of the polls, much better than in 2020, much better than in 2016. The general energy, everything that there was. And you remember, I was like, well, something's going to happen. They can't just let him walk right back into the White House. And so, yeah, no, I still have that. I'm still, it's not so much disbelief, but it is a certain, there's this little rock that it's gotten a bit smaller, but there's still this rock at the bottom of my stomach. And it's like constantly there, like, what are they going to do? Something's going to happen. They can't just let all of the things they built up, and by they, in many ways we mean Obama, but I think it goes beyond that. I mean, sort of the wider left. And you mentioned DEI. Well, that seems to be gone. The giant bureaucratic mega state. Well, Elon, if it's the last thing he does, I'm absolutely certain he will take care of that. It might not be a 90% cut like what he did at Twitter, but it will be a big change that's coming. And then you look at some of these people. Obviously, Jay Bhattacharya, we talked about him on one of our shows. He was right about everything to do with COVID, including its origin. So that's going to come out. And of course, on that front, we've also got Kash Patel, of course, so it feels like, yeah, like what you said, everything is kind of going in the right direction. And the other shoe is going to drop kind of, I can't, I completely agree with you. And I think my sense of it is probably even worse than yours, judging from, our pre-election chats, that something is going to happen and we're not going to like it.
Yeah, I guess for me, it's a sense of just simply things are going so well. It's kind of like too good to be true. And history tells us that, the deep state's not going to go quietly into the night. That said, though, I was just as you were talking, I was thinking back to earlier in the election cycle. And one of the things that I was wondering about, and I even sent a couple tweets on it, kind of pondering, like, did the Democrats just kind of abdicate this election cycle? And it's almost as if they painted themselves into a corner. They kind of went with Biden and they were forced to keep Biden longer than they probably wanted to because Kamala was so bad. But yet they'd elevated Kamala, and with their DEI and wokeism and pandering to Black Lives Matter and everything else, they were sort of, by the same token, stuck with Kamala. So somewhere in the, call it 23-ish time frame, it seems like they began to find themselves again painted into that proverbial corner of, oh my gosh, we're stuck with Biden. And then, of course, when Biden fell on his face, it became the we're stuck with Kamala. But nevertheless, they were stuck with those two. And, not coincidentally, that coincides with the dramatic upscale in lawfare and the attacks on Trump, that maybe somewhere along the way, the realization was like, look, we can't do anything. The only way we can stop him is to put him in prison. So let's go that route. Let's attack him with the DOJ. Let's really ignite the lawfare. And of course, everything they tried, nothing worked. They even were pushing the assassination cycle. I mean, we literally had editorials. Kagan's, Victoria Nuland's husband, Robert Kagan, his editorial was the one that's most kind of prominent in that fact, kind of saying like, look, there's nothing we can do. The lawfare is falling apart. Somebody has to act. This is desperate. He's going to become president. It was literally quite, calling for the assassination of Trump without using that word. And that failed. And here we are.
Look, I remember we had a show, and this was probably right around the time of Biden's train wreck debate. That would have been June 27th of this year, where we both kind of played with the idea of, well, are they just giving up 2024 because they have something bigger in mind in terms of regrouping, coming back stronger, all that kind of stuff? Because, as you said, all these ploys, in particular the lawfare, didn't work out. In fact, it worked the opposite way. It only made Trump stronger. And I don't think they ever kind of abdicated. I think there were people there holding out hope that somehow they could kind of eke out a win, or all the TDS people were certainly thinking, oh, no way, people would still vote for Trump after everything, that we put this guy through. And yet they did. What I find surprising is that, they are doing things now. I mean, that's not ignore that. So, for instance, at the FBI, you probably saw that too. They've been promoting and entrenching some of their most horrible people to make sure that when Kash Patel arrives, he's stuck with them. So it's sort of that effort is going on across multiple agencies. So we're seeing reports kind of across the map where they're trying to do those kinds of things. So promote all the bad people, entrench all the bad people, set other kinds of booby traps. But it doesn't feel to me as if this is some kind of hugely thought through, coordinated effort. It's
Very
more kind of
reactive, isn't it?
happenstance. Like, yeah, it's like, oh, well, we got to do something. We got what, a month and a bit left here. Okay, let's do this, let's do that. It's sort of panicky. It's all very undemocrat-like. But that ties in with something we talked about on a previous show, which is, Obama lost his magic, and he no longer kind of controls the show, and the emperor's clothes are off, and everyone sees it, and there's no one to fill his place. It's like they're completely leader and rudderless. In fact, the one, have you noticed as well, the one who seems to have grabbed that mantle the most is Adam Schiff, the newly elected senator out of California. In terms of uh, talking like a leader, or trying to, and being on the media all the time, and so on. I mean, I hate to say it, but he's sort of trying to vie for that position.
Well, if that's their idea of a leader, I say good luck to them. One of the things, this whole idea, even just about this abdication, or, maybe we'll punt, or we're forced to punt, we don't have a choice until 2028. I don't know what the Democrat Party's even going to look like in 2028. They're finding themselves weakened on every front. And one of the things you and I have talked about a number of times is this idea that the progressive left has been this anchor around the neck of the Democratic Party, just dragging them further and further to the left. And the idea was that that's going to be their death knell, that's going to be their undoing. And, when you talk about not having a leader, I think right now one of the things that we do have ongoing is this sort of struggle for the soul of the Democratic Party behind the scenes. And that the power has shifted from this extreme left back to the more moderate Democrats that are having a voice and saying, look, kind of, we did your program and everything fell apart. Not that he's a leader, but I think of somebody who's proven to be a more moderate voice who's gaining traction is Cenk Unger, who's been out there just kind of talking rationally about things. It's shocking to see it happen. And I think he's getting a lot of agreement with that. So there does seem to be a realization that we just can't continue down the path that we've been continuing. Nevertheless, that's a huge schism for the Democratic Party that's probably going to lead to their complete reformulation and maybe push them in a position where they're just not going to resemble what they resemble now, and B, not be any kind of position of power in 2028. I may be a little Pollyanna at
Fetterman.
this, but that's kind of where I feel right now.
Fetterman is the other one, um,
Yeah,
who's
perfect
trying to
example.
speak sanity and at least somewhat a big litmus test of this idea that maybe they're going to try and kind of steady the ship is whether anyone in the any Democrat in the Senate is going to vote for any of Trump's nominees. That's going to be extremely interesting to see whether that happens. Now, of course, we could see that when the shoe was on the other foot, when Biden nominated Merrick Garland and Lisa Monaco, the Russiagate hoaxer, whereby hoaxer is far too nice a word, conspirator, one of the most awful people in all of Washington, D.C. Every single GOP senator, but for Ted Cruz and Rand Paul, voted for that woman. And a whole bunch of them, most of them voted for Garland and Lloyd Austin, and you can go through the whole list. And of course, we can already say with certainty that all Democrats, except for, and this is where I'm heading with this, all Democrats are going to vote against every single Trump nominee. And I think the litmus test is to see whether any of them will vote, would like Fetterman or whatever will vote the other way. Um, if that happens, it will give us a good indication of where things are going, that there will be people who are trying to pull the whole party back to sanity and so on. But yeah, well, we'll have to see. I'm not so confident that even Fetterman's going to vote for any of these nominees.
Wouldn't it be telling if you had somebody like Fetterman actually vote for one of these nominees, and we had some of this traitorous Senate GOP guys? I'm thinking, like Thune and Barrasso and Cornyn and Joni Ernst sure stepped in it. Just she didn't need to talk about self-inflicted wounds. If one of those didn't. And Joni Ernst is a great example. You had mentioned Lisa Monaco, and that was an example that got brought up and put in her face because here she is opposing like Hegseth, etc. And this is a person who voted Monaco right through without a single question about her Russiagate involvement. And that is one of the problems. We have some real cleanup on, aisle 10 that needs to be done. And most of it resides, a lot of it's in the House too, but the biggest problem probably is in the Senate GOP. That's kind of where our biggest, number of rhinos reside. And having Thune being the leader, I feel like people don't really realize what a complete snake Thune is. I mean, he's going to go along with Trump's agenda only to the extent that it suits him. And if he has any chance to stab Trump in the back, he's going to take it. Um, I, you
You
know,
know, I think at the end of the day, most of them will vote for most of Trump's nominees, and they'll do it pretty much across the board, except for the ones we know are problematic: Murkowski, Collins, and the new Romney out of Utah. And he might not even be as problematic in the end. So on the whole, they will pretty much vote for Trump's nominees. What irks me is about people like Thune and Ernst and so on. All the ones who've been in the media these past few weeks, blah 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 about their concerns about this and that and whatever. what irks me about that is that they're doing that at all. They're at a point in time where what they ought to be saying, all of them, especially because they're going to vote for these people anyway in the end. What they should be saying is President Trump just won in a massive landslide. And we can come back to whether it was a landslide and why it was a landslide and so on. There's a lot of misinformation on that. He won in a massive landslide. He deserves to appoint whoever he thinks is right to his team to implement his policies that he was voted in for. And that's the job of a GOP senator right now, to say just that, and that's it. And then shut up about all the other stuff, this advise and consent stuff. And it just is so infuriating that they're grandstanding because they want to be on CNN or whatever about this and that, and I'm gonna have to study this Hegseth guy more closely and this and that, and it's extremely frustrating, especially as I said, because they'll all vote for these people anyway in the end. So and it's really just it's grandstanding. It's wanting to be on
Well, but
TV.
all those names that you just ran through go exactly to my point that the Senate GOP is such a problem. Joni Ernst may have just ended her political career, unnecessarily, but I'm glad that she's got herself in such hot water. But you mentioned McCursky, you mentioned Collins, and then you go back to the people that are a little bit more careful, but are, because they're much more politically expedient. Again, I'm thinking about the McConnell wing of the Senate GOP, and those people again operate. They're the stereotypical GOP establishment. They're not in line with Trump. They may vote with Trump, but only to the extent that it's politically expedient for them. And that's not a position we should be in. We should be in a position where everybody's more or less in lockstep with, MAGA, with Trump. And instead, we've got a fair number. I mean, really, if I look at it from the flip side, like who would I trust in the Senate GOP? And I think about, well, it's Eric Schmidt, probably Rand Paul. And then there's kind of a second tier that I wouldn't put in the same category, but maybe Josh Hawley, Ted Cruz. Again, it's a separate camp. And then from there, it really drops off to like, okay, I don't trust anybody else. As a matter of fact, I'd like to see most everybody else wiped out of the Senate GOP. So that's kind of what I meant, is that we've got a whole bunch of people. They may end up voting the right way, but to think that they're in lockstep or supportive of what Trump's doing, they're not. And the Senate, in my mind, is the single biggest problem that we have right now. And, we really need to focus on that over the next 4 years, but in particular in 26, and send a message by primarying some of these folks and getting them out of there and getting things cleaned up. It's about time, right when there's no better time to do this than when the Democrats are in disarray. As the Democrat Party is beginning to fall apart, the hallmark of the DNC is that they've always moved 100% in lockstep. And right now, they're for the first time in memory, there's real division there. And it would be wonderful if we could actually take advantage of that and clean up our own house, because we do have a lot of problems. And again, to me, the Senate GOP is the hallmark of that.
Yeah, and it's not going to happen. I mean, by the time 26 comes around, everyone would have forgotten about the Ernst thing, and it. Part of the problem is that these people are in those kinds of states where they're basically guaranteed a win. And now it should be that
Why are
those
they
people
guaranteed to
should be
win?
the. So this is the thing, right? I mean, not them particularly, but like but Republicans because it's in Oklahoma or in wherever. Um, This is you're absolutely right that there is something fundamentally wrong about the system where the people who are in those deep red states who are guaranteed wins, at least the ones who win their primaries, um, they tend to be some of the most problematic ones. Whereas the ones who have to eke out wins, like Ron Johnson in Wisconsin, and people like him, they tend to be much, much, much more reliable because they know it's going to come back and bite them when election time comes. But yeah, so it's sort of exactly upside down from the way it should be. Um, I don't think there's a fix there. I mean, the system, the way the system is designed has its pluses and minuses, and obviously one of the minuses is that the leader of the executive branch is not guaranteed the support of the legislative branch. It's just there's unlike other political systems, that's just not given. Of course, there's a lot of pluses in that as well because you have proper separation of powers. So um, I I don't think there's a fix there. Certainly not constitutionally. Uh, Maybe there's a fix in terms of, as you say, some of these people need to be taught a lesson. But I just always find that when when we're 2 years on, that there was that tweet that Trump sent in 2020. Do you remember that when he said, "Who knows what they're going to be doing in 2 years' time? But I'm going to be in Alaska making sure that Lisa Murkowski doesn't get reelected." And then she got reelected.
I kind of feel if you had asked me this a couple of years ago, I would have said 100%. I would have been in lockstep with you. I sort of feel like we're in a realm where new rules apply and that the machine is beginning to finally show cracks in it, that it's worn, tired, and starting to break down. And if you bring somebody like Pressler, Charlie Kirk, if they come to bear against one of these senators, I think the old rules kind of go out the window. I think we can make a change. I hear you. There's a long history of, people are hot and bothered about a topic. Heck, we've seen that on the budget, and then nothing ever changed on the budget, et cetera. Time and again. That's why we're at where we are with our debt. But I do feel like there's something fundamentally that's changed. So I'm a little more hopeful while acknowledging that 2 years is a long time and, all the emotional fervor can wear off. But if we have Elon Vivek going full bore, trying to really tear down the federal government, I think that can carry that fervor through. I guess what I'm saying is I'm a little more hopeful that maybe we can actually get something more fundamental accomplished.
Well, if we just stick here for a moment with these awful senators, um, it's not going to happen without Trump's blessing. That's kind of number one. But Trump is in a bind because he needs the votes from these people. So it's very unlikely that come, March of 2026, Trump is going to go out there and send a tweet saying that he supports Joni Ernst's opponent or, whoever is sort of going to be targeted there. That's really the problem. And that's what they rely on. I mean, look at Lindsey. Lindsey's been an absolutely terrible senator forever. I mean, he was John McCain's appendage forever. And then, of course, McCain passed, and now Lindsey's just terrible on his own. And every time it comes to his reelection, everything is sort of forgotten. And then he was even on he was a Trump advisor, whatever his role was on the Trump 2024. And I can understand that politically because, you want, you don't want to burn bridges with everyone and you still need their votes and so on and so forth. But you're just in this vicious circle that you can never, ever get out. So, in terms of primarying some of these people, um, I think I completely agree with you. It's absolutely necessary. The lessons, they have to be taught lessons, especially the worst ones. And certainly, if any one of these people, again, forget about Murkowski, Collins, and maybe one or two others that we kind of know are like I already mentioned. I keep forgetting his name. The new Romney. Um, but if any one of these people votes against a Trump nominee and they then don't get in, there has to be payback.
Yep.
And the payback, agree with you. It has to be very organized. It has to be people like Pressler and so on and so forth on the ground, but it will need to be supported by Trump, even if that's very bad for Trump politically in terms of having support in the Senate and every vote counts and all that kind of stuff. You're gonna have to give the support to that effort. And probably it makes sense to target just one or two, really pool your resources to teach, you know, some people that lesson. I mean, Eric Cantor always comes to mind, and that was actually grassroots, getting rid of that awful guy, and very much deservedly so. So I agree with you, it's possible, but that was, I mean, that was a huge one, and it would take a similar effort, absolute grassroots, but also with Trump support to do it. But yeah, I agree with you because otherwise they're never going to learn their lesson, and even if that happens, most of them will still not learn their lesson anyway.
Yeah, and Lindsey Graham's a good example, right? He seems like it's hard to find a politician that's more universally hated. Like everybody hates Lindsey Graham, the left and the right. They all come together to hate Lindsey Graham, and yet he's continuously reelected in a landslide. And here's a guy who's the most fervent supporter for further bloodshed in Ukraine. So you're right. It is a vicious cycle, and I think that's what we've kind of locked ourselves into. I still maintain a little more hope that with what I think we're going to see increasing disunity among the Democrats, that maybe there's a chance to do something. But I'd appreciate it if you'd stop talking sense because I don't want to hear that. I just want to hear how we're going to primary people in 2026.
Well, why don't we come back to something else that we mentioned earlier and kind of look at the bigger picture in general? Because uh, it, leaving aside this sort of unease about whatever Democrats might have in store, whatever the new Russiagate hoax is going to be, whatever traps they're going to spring, and so on. If we just leave that aside for a moment, and maybe they are just in disarray, and there isn't going to be this big counter movement effort, attack, whatever you want to call it, at least for a while. What what's left is just the stunningness of Trump's comeback. It's just absolutely astonishing. If you go back 2 years at the midterms in 2022, that was certainly his low point. And I think it was also his low point in terms of his energy, his emotions, all of that. And someone like him, he lives off of that. Well, you have to. I mean, you can't be um, a larger than life person without being driven by and affected by emotions and by energy and so on and so forth. And to be in the spotlight like he's been for, what, like 50 years and still being relevant all this time, it's just astonishing. And I always think of the midterms of 2022 being kind of the low point when he sent out those tweets about DeSantis and about Youngkin and so on. He was not in a good place. And then it took him like a week or so, and then he picked himself up, and he just ran with it. And the more they threw at him, the stronger he grew. Because of course, in 23, we got all the horrible lawfare, and I am absolutely astonished about how just the size of the comeback, the impossibility of the comeback. They were literally calling him Hitler. Every single media outlet was out there saying he's finished, he's the most awful person on earth, on and on and on. And now, other than winning the election, did you just see what happened in France when every world leader was over there for the Notre Dame reopening that had burned down back in 2019? And it wasn't Macron or whatever who was like, well, he was the host there over there, but the the star person, the star guest, the one they all wanted to see, and they all bowed. They all, from Prince William to like every single one of them. It was just astonishing. Um, how they treated Trump as royalty plus, whereas 6 months ago they were decrying him as the worst person ever. It's really one for the ages. I don't think that has kind of sunk in yet in terms of how incredibly special this achievement is.
That's a great example, and it provides a great contrast with the way Biden has been treated. Not even making it into some pictures or being relegated to the back or being directed around like a toddler. And it's quite the visual comparison. I also feel like Trump is one of those guys who exercises power in a completely unique way. And right now I'm thinking about Justin Trudeau and the tariffs and some of the tweets that he sent out recently. He's in complete control of the situation and he knows it. And, even worse, they know it. And, now we have the benefit of not only is it Trump, who kind of came in uncloaked and alone in 2016, kind of all by himself, really. And in many cases, he wasn't aware that he was all by himself, but he was. We know that with hindsight. He basically had nobody working to help him and everybody working to undermine him. And now he's coming in and he's got, a whole different cadre of people. And just the fact that you've got Vivek and Elon that are going to be out there attacking the government, I don't think that aspect can be can be overstated enough, because that's a wrecking ball that's coming in, that's putting the whole kind of establishment, the intelligence community, everything back on their heels, right? They're fighting cuts, downsizing, and it keeps them off balance. If you're thinking about a fight, they're on their back foot the entire time trying to react to this as they're trying to react to Trump. So I do think that the aspect of having Elon and Vivek coming in this massive, cost-cutting effort, which frankly is going to do nothing but unleash unprecedented wealth for Americans and immediately recognizable wealth, that is going to be a really, really big plus to this whole administration.
I think that's going to be potentially the big if they can pull it off. And that's a big if, not because they're not competent or they don't have the right ideas, but because of the bureaucratic and legal impediments. You can't just fire people, and on and on and on. Budget goes through Congress. Just all these kinds of things you can, well, and they're more than aware of all the problems themselves. If they can pull it off, at least to some large extent, again, I don't expect a 90% cut like what happened at Twitter, even though I think that would be the ideal kind of number. Um, it would be I would agree, it would be the biggest part of this entire presidency. First of all, because it's necessary. You cannot have a country with a 36 trillion deficit, which works out as, and was it, what did we say, like
Yeah,
110,000 or
36
so
trillion in
per?
debt. It's about 110,000 per every person.
Exactly. So
And
every person has
it's
to,
about 123% of GDP, but that's also at peak GDP. Wait until if we move into a downturn, that number's going to inflate. It's bankruptcy numbers is what it is.
if it could just be one, if I just had to choose one, it would absolutely be cutting the government down big time, because that's the one that's going to have the biggest impact. And we see it in Argentina with Milei. Um, there was just some new statistics that came out in terms of it's really working. He is actually, for the first time in, was it like 123 years, they don't have a deficit. It's just mind-boggling, isn't it?
The amount of fat that exists, you mentioned a 90% figure. I mean, we literally, in a perfect world, you could probably downsize our government at least by 80% and have it still be fully functional. There's that much waste that is going on. 6% of government workers actually show up to work. It just, the list goes on, and all of that accrues to kind of the elite and to corporations, et cetera. It feeds certain sectors, but it doesn't filter its way down to kind of middle America. And you're right. If that begins to happen, and the effects of this will be felt almost immediately. It's not going to be a big lag time where it's 10 years down the road. People start to feel it. It's like we're talking about massive reduction in need for taxes, et cetera. It's an enormous change in efficiency. And I keep thinking, we used a tagline of move quickly and break things for one of our early shows. And that's stuck with me. That just can always plays in my head, because I think that should really be their mantra. Move fast, shake things up, break things. It accomplishes so much at the same time. Not only are you gaining the efficiencies, but you're keeping your opponents perpetually on their back heels. And I agree with you, it's a monumental task, but I can't imagine a better person than Elon to be tasked with, trying to pull that off. I have a lot more faith in the fact that we have him than if it was just a lot of happy talk and, a couple gung-ho guys. I don't think we'd have the same effect. But I think he's dead set determined to do this.
Oh, he is. And again, I think everything Elon has to be seen through the prism of, there was this young boy once who wanted to go to Mars. And he was an extremely gifted and extremely smart boy who was way smarter than all the adults. And that was Elon. And all he wanted to do was go to Mars. Everything he's done, you can see through that prism. And this is one of those things, because If the country's bankrupt, he's not going to go to Mars. Um, and if the country is completely, if the bureaucracy, well, he can, other than the financial aspects of it. Um, do you remember when he was trying to these early launches with Starship, and they made him jump through all those hoops? He had to do a study about, how the such and such fish are going to be affected by the rocket, and how this and that, and then if he did the one fish, they sent him another form to do for some other kind of fish or whatever. I mean, it's just he knows better than anyone, especially given that that is his big goal. That's all he ever wanted. He knows better than anyone. And by the way, when I say that, there's a system to the madness. Like Tesla. Well, what's that got to do with Mars? Well, batteries. You need batteries. You need the best batteries. You need the best way of getting energy if you're going to go to Mars. Every other venture that you can look at, Twitter is the one that may not quite fit in. But then again, if you, well, he said that many times, if you lose free speech, well, then you lose it all. What's the point of going to Mars when
It's
you no
also
longer
not
have
that, it's
freedom?
what he's doing with AI and on the computing scale that stands behind Grok.
Exactly.
I mean, he just achieved some incredible build out. Everybody said it was impossible what he's done on the computer build out side. And that I think he did it first and foremost for free speech, but secondarily he realized that that could become the vehicle for his AI ventures, which play directly into kind of the Mars goal.
And so far, he hasn't failed in any of his ventures. He's come a couple of times he came close, but he he just has this magic. He's like Trump himself, what we talked about earlier, the greatest comeback. Um, Elon is actually well, they're very different in terms of their personalities and those kinds of things, but in that way, they're actually really close. And um, that might be the reason why they seem to have forged this very unique, very unlikely friendship. But
Yeah.
it's sort of it's really saving the world right now. So coming back to the point you made, if there is anyone who's going to be able to do this, it's Elon. He is literally the best person in the entire world to have doing this task, the downsizing, the efficiency, all of that kind of stuff. And yeah, that would be the biggest legacy for Trump. Elon's biggest legacy, obviously Mars, but for Trump. Um, and no, it's not just about legacy. It's not just about history books. It's actually about saving the world. I mean, we've just had this massive realignment, much of it caused by Biden, where the world is bifurcated and things look pretty gloomy, and now they don't look quite so gloomy anymore. I wanted to come back to something we mentioned earlier because it's something that irks me, and it goes with the sort of the the size of the victory or just the fact that it's like the greatest comeback ever. It's just amazing what Trump has achieved. So have you seen people get all upset if you say it's like it was a huge landslide, it was a landslide victory.
Yeah.
That word, they don't like that word. So I just wanted to come back to that very briefly. Um, it was a landslide. It was a huge landslide because the way you have to measure it is by the rules of the game. You can't measure a game by having different kinds of rules. Um, so in a football game, it doesn't matter whether it's run yards or passing yards. That doesn't matter for the rules. You still get the points. So you can't then just score the game just on run yards because you just made up new rules. So in that analogy, um, you can't look at how many votes someone got in California because no one, the presidential candidates didn't go out there. They didn't, they had no rallies. The rules of the game right now, and that can maybe change over time, but right now is that there are about 9, 10, something like that, swing states. And that's where the action takes place. The entire election is not really a US election, it's an election in those swing states. If you look at the schedule, if you look at where the rallies were, if you look at where the get out the votes efforts were, if you look at all those metrics, it was in those 10 states. And Trump won every single one of those states. So by any measure, that is a landslide.
Yeah, I mean, if you're trying to bring it back to points, Here are the points. You've got Trump with the White House, the presidency, the executive office. You've got the House. You've got the Senate. You've got the Supreme Court. You've got the popular vote by a margin. Even in California, Trump got what? Close to 40%. I know it was eroded, but close to 40% of the vote. You know, there's no winning metric in terms of your football analogy. There's no points that you can put in the Democrat column. It's a goose egg. It's zero. Every single point resides over with Trump. So you're right. It was a landslide. And they know it. They know it.
Yeah, but they still keep fighting that point. I see that on Twitter all the time. No, it wasn't a landslide. It was actually a
I
really
mean, they
close
try to say it,
election
but
and
I'm
this and that
talking
and
about
whatever.
the powers that be. They can say whatever they want, but they
Yeah,
know it was a landslide. They know.
they do. And that might be part of the reason why they seem so in disarray right now, or why they just sort of it's very coming back to how we started the show today. It's just very noticeable that there's no organized pushback, and this is the first time that I can remember that there was no organized pushback.
Well, when I think about it, I still talk. I come back to the division within the Democrat Party, and the fact, that point about the left being this, the extreme left being this anchor around the DNC's neck. I personally think that there's a large number of there's a faction, probably not a small one, within the DNC, within the Democrat Party, that sees this as an opportunity for themselves as well, an attempt to try to reclaim their party. And with that happening, that creates the set of opportunities for us. But it also created a set of opportunities for them to try and take back their party a little bit from the extreme faction. And I think that's partly what's at play as well, is that they're distracted with that effort and are just saying, all right, we lost, go ahead, and we lost fundamentally. And we recognize, we're not going to say it publicly, but we recognize we lost fundamentally and we have to do something to fix our own party, or we're over. We no longer exist as a political force.
Isn't it just weird in a nice, weird, strange, lovely, strange, but very strange how the the general perception was that the GOP would be in kind of civil war disarray after Trump. And for a while, I thought that too, that was going to happen because he would just leave such a ginormous vacuum. And of course, that's all completely changed now because first of all, he's around and he's going to be president. But second of all, he's already installed all the people. Look at all his starting from JD Vance as vice president, but you can go through the whole list of nominees. These are all very young people. So he's kind of already so made sure that the future is going to continue in the same vein.
Well, that's
He's put
exactly right.
everyone in
Remember, we were
place.
talking about primary and GOP senators, and we were talking about Scott Pressler and Charlie Kirk.
Right.
New young
And
Turks of the party.
that's right. So there's going to be no civil war after Trump. There's going to be no vacuum. And the beautiful thing about it is that Trump himself saw to that. I think that's absolutely beautiful. That's extremely wise. Um, but I don't think people give him credit for that, or not yet. I think eventually they will. But the reason why I said it was such a beautiful irony is just so strange, but so beautifully so, is that the exact opposite has happened on the Democrat side, where everyone thought, oh, their bench is large and wide and they're going to be fine. They are now in this post-Obama rut, and there's no one there. I mean, did you see there was some poll they took that where Kamala is their leading candidate for 28? I mean, come on. I mean, I'll eat my hat if she is the candidate in 28. That's just not going to happen. She was the worst candidate that, anyone's ever seen. But then the reason why she's at the top of that poll is precisely because there's no one on the bench. There's literally no one there. I mean, I mentioned Adam Schiff earlier. Obviously, he's not presidential material. He's so absolutely horrific, that guy, in so many ways. But the
Well,
fact
what
that
you're
he even
talking about is the shattering of the Democrat model that we can plug anybody in. It doesn't matter who they are. We can use the machine to make them win. And that machine broke down in 2024. And now they know it. And like, we've seen those pictures of Obama looking tired and angry and defeated and sweaty under his arms. And, he's done. But so is Kamala. I mean, literally, we had Jill Biden out there publicly mocking, what was it, the joy refrain of Kamala's. And not only weren't people, I mean, there was a round of laughter and applause. That right there was very telling. Kamala's done. She's not going to be the candidate in 2028. Like you, I will eat my hat.
and that makes me think that it's the 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 only path I see right now for them is someone we've never heard of. It's kind of like
Yeah.
think of Obama a couple of years before he ran for president, and no
John
one ever
Fetterman
heard
for
of the guy.
president.
Fetterman, people make jokes about the fact that he needed to have he had a stroke and kind of he had his head recalibrated. Now it's all good. Um, but joking aside, no, I mean they're not he's not gonna be president.
No,
But
but
I do think that they're gonna come up. Eventually, they will find their feet. And then they're going to find someone whom we've probably never heard of. But yeah, I think the chances of any of the characters we've seen for the past 4 years, that, one of those guys is going to emerge and be the presidential candidate that's extremely slim. They
the
were all
closest one I could
so
think of might
dire.
be Josh Shapiro.
Right. But you see, she didn't pick him. That's the thing, right? Because that just tells you about the depth of the rut that she picked this Waltz guy whom he was so terrible. We're never going to hear about this guy ever again. Well, hopefully, and especially his wife. Um, but anyway, he's not going to play a role in national politics. And yeah, but you can go through the entire cabinet. Every one of those people. They're just all absolutely awful. From Blinken to whatever, Austin, all of these people, they're just terrible. Mayorkas, whatever. There's no presidential material there. And I'm not even talking about people I like or whatever. I mean, simply people who could credibly, stand on that podium and appear presidential. Um, I can't think of someone right now. And again, that's why I think
You know
where this
why
is
you
going to
can't
lead
think of
is,
anybody? Because of Obama and because of his
yeah,
insecurities.
yep.
We talked about this a ways back, and I think this is an important point. In Obama, basically, they cast when they were building the Biden administration. You and I were noting that they basically put idiots everywhere, just figurehead people that had no business being in their positions, except for certain places, the CIA, but the DOJ is what most obviously leaps to mind, where they put people like Lisa Monaquin. But they were all Obama people. Obama never had the ability to try to raise up people. He brought in his loyalists into the key crucial positions, and then he ensured that it was buffoonery in all the other positions. So nobody was being built up to kind of take over. It was just Obama attempting to continue his legacy. And now Obama's done. I mean, you have any doubt of that? Just go under his Twitter feed and see the mocking that happens. He's done. He is no longer a political force. And with that, most of his people then go with him. That era has ended. But because of his insecurities and his unwillingness to help the Democratic Party as a whole, there was nobody to be promoted, which gets back to your point that who we're going to see is probably somebody who we hadn't really thought of or heard of, but it's probably going to be a while.
It is. And maybe as a last thought here, and I know we've already said this, but just the contrast between what you just said and Trump couldn't be stronger. The wisdom, but also the courage and the foresight of Trump to pick J.D. Vance and to pick many of his nominees who are all fairly young people. But I mean, it really started with Vance. Very not your typical vice presidential candidate, not your kind of just your safe pick, some elderly guy who's done this before or whatever. Um, it was really a passing the torch moment. For all the Democrats always talking about passing the torch, Trump actually did it. And yeah, I thought that was extremely courageous. I thought it was extremely wise. I think history will one day record that as as having been a huge, huge thing that he did there. Exactly the opposite of, as you just explained, from what Obama did. He never had the courage. He was always, as you say, too self-centered, where everything had to be about him. And that's what they always said about Trump for years and years. That's all I heard about Trump. It was always about him. He's a narcissist, whatever. And then he did that.
It's ironic that that's been completely turned on its head. And, if you look at the Trump administration, you make a very valid point, is when I look at the Trump administration, it's populated with future presidential candidates and strong ones across the board. Couldn't be more different than the route that Obama took.